Yep, George front and center. We're good.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So, I'm gonna just PowerPoint this thing over here. So a couple of the books that I do want to draw your attention to that I used as part of the lesson is Crisis and Trauma Counseling. Has a section on divorce in children and adolescents. And in the second session, this is a three-part training. So the first session, we don't talk too much about the grief, but in the second session, we talk about how divorce can be everything. And so that's a resource that maybe would be beneficial to some of you. We're going to be sending out an email with the names of those and any of the resources that I'm going to be providing for today. Also, you're going to be taking a look at the treatment plan today. I use the Child Psychotherapy Treatment Planner. There's also an adolescent one. Really great resource for making the treatment plans and also the AISP plans for you. So those are two books that I'll be putting in an email for you to look at. I also have a couple of assessments, child assessment on PTSD and how to rate that. And then I also have an adolescent assessment that are partial sentences that the adolescent will finish. So that's something else that I'll be sending you an email if you wish it. And is that up there? The adolescent assessment, you can actually cut it up, put it on flashcards, maybe with parking for. It's a really good resource. Also helps for them to be processing and talking about the divorce and their emotions about it. So today the presentation is going to be focusing on divorce. Like I said, it's a three-part presentation. You're just going to be hearing the first part today. And the first part is talking just about the different developmental stages of a child, what they should be doing at that point, and what possibly is being disrupted with the divorce. And some things, we're going to talk a little bit about the technique, and although in the third session, that's more of what I have available for you. We'll take a look at the pathology, the DSM-5-2 today, and we'll also have just some points that you might need to know as clinicians and working in any home and working with joint custody and shared custody and some of the legal aspects. So those are just some things we're going to cover today. Great. So when we talk about divorce, I don't want you to have just that narrow vocabulary for divorce. It's not just a married situation. It's possible also that these symptoms and issues would occur if the parents were together for a long amount of time, if the child identifies with a mom and identifies with a dad and there's a split between the couple. That can also trigger some of these things that we're going to talk about today. So do not only think about it narrowly as, okay, it has to be a divorce case. It could be a parent separation case as well. Okay. So taking a look at the statistics for us, how many of you are surprised that about 43% of marriages fall apart? Anybody surprised? Really?
I think it'd be more.
Interesting. It's around 43% as of 2010 statistics right now. So some of the factors that are included in this is educational attainment. That means if they've just reached a high school level or a college level, they're more apt to get a divorce as opposed to somebody who's maybe extended their education a little further. Also, the age, if they're getting married very young, their marriage chances are less likely. And the gender, it seems that women tend to get married more, but they are also getting divorced more. Ethnicity is also an issue. African American women those who get married tend to end up in divorce more often than white and Hispanic, and Asian, white and Asian. One of the statistics that I thought was really interesting was about the custody. Apparently there's a rise in shared custody. It's still predominantly mom taking custody when it's single parent. However, there tends to be a rise in now shared custody. And that's good news for us, because we definitely want both parents involved in the child's life to minimize the effects of the divorce and the grief of loss. So that's something actually very positive. As the marriage number goes up, this becomes more of an issue. If they're married second and third time, they're more likely to break up. And you can consider a child in a home with multiple marriages. They're now accustomed to marriages ending in divorce or ending in a split, or even parents that live together ending up apart. So that's the reference point. What we're learning about divorce is that it's not just the immediate occurrence of divorce. It's not just that when it happens, they're having a crisis and a trauma and we have to deal with it. We're finding that the effects of divorce are long-term and they go all the way into adulthood. And that's something for us as counselors and VAs to really take a look at, because we may be seeing some symptoms that are an effect of some earlier trauma of divorce. So how many of you are working with children right now that are either in the middle of a divorce or come from divorced families? Single family? Just keep your hands up. Okay, so if you look around you, and there's a majority of you that are working already with children that are dealing with some of these issues. And, income is also an issue, as you may imagine. Lower income causes more divorce, and there's more. It's more likely that the marriage would break up with financial burden. And then imagine when the child loses the home, that financial problem actually increases in single-family homes that have more of a stress on the parent for those reasons. So you said you're not surprised at the statistics. How about everybody else? What do you think about what we're talking about with the joint custody, shared custody, and the marriages? Any surprises? Okay,
I got a question. In the joint custody, is that a result of both parents in agreement, or okay?
Right. So, and I have toward the end of this session, I have a definition of the joint custody. But joint custody, it could be that both parents have a right to the child, and then it could also be that you have one parent that takes care of the health in the school, but that the other parent is still involved and could see the child. So you have to maybe ask those questions, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, because some of that custody is going to come into play with disclosure and who you can talk to and not talk to. All right, so taking a look at some of the disorders that we see. As I said, divorce can be long-term, so some of these disorders may actually come from a previous divorce in the child's life. So adjustment disorder is more immediate. That's when the divorce is occurring right at that moment. They could be losing their home, they could be losing a parent, siblings, could be breaking up. So there's quite a bit of loss and movement in the child's life that would cause adjustment disorder. This could be with anxiety, it could be with depression, depending on the child. It could develop into a full-bloom anxiety disorder for some children. Depressive disorders, dysregulation, mood. The somatic symptoms I thought I would touch on. How many of your kids might complain of headaches or stomach aches or want to be going to the doctor all the time? Okay. I have a client right now constantly complaining that she doesn't feel well. At this point, the parents don't believe her anymore and they don't want to take her anymore. But it is a real thing that those somatic symptoms, while might not be a physical ailment, there might be something that they're not fully dealing with. And so it's coming out in a physical form. So making parents aware of that and helping them to understand that this might be an effect of a trauma or a crisis because of the divorce, or because if parents are not getting along, if there's a lot of turmoil in the house, this may be causing some of the problems. Suicide is always something to look out for, and also cutting behavior, also common with this group, especially adolescent. And again, this could be if the divorce is not happening right at that moment, this could be later on. So if you're seeing any of these disorders, if you're getting these kids with these disorders, do a history, find out what's going on, what happened in their life. Is it a single parent? Are they in the divorce there might be some residual things that are going on for the child from a previous divorce. Some other disorders to consider are more interpersonal with the parent. The parent has a big role in how the child does and how well they adjust to the divorce. And it's super important that George was talking about, we're going to have to engage in some family therapy. This is really a piece where we would have to intervene. So you have some parents that are so angry with each other, maybe there's adultery, they're just constant conflicts, they're bringing in the child, they're having the child side with one parent or another. And so this is some of the disorders that can come from that kind of interaction. You have obviously the divorce would be put into the diagnosis, parent-child relational problems. The child may be very angry, especially to the parent that is precipitating the divorce or the one that is leaving. There's also, under these categories, you have to watch for abuse. Sometimes the breakup is abuse and it's just a necessary breakup. It's necessary to take the child away from the parent, but there could be long-term effects of that as well. Once in a while, you might have parents that might have delusional disorder. They may be jealous, or they may be suspicious of another parent, or they just may have a vision of the other parent that is extremely negative. What happens is the child may begin to adopt some of those delusions. I had a case a couple of years ago with a family, and the mom had some mental illness of her own, was seeing a therapist, but she had delusional disorder. She was very, very jealous. She saw her husband having affairs all over the place. Well, what happened was that the daughter started to adopt some of those same beliefs and ideas as the mom, and she also became very suspicious of the dad. And what would happen was that the daughter was actually making accusations about the dad and bringing it back to the mom and creating a greater rift between the parents and a greater rift between her and her father. And it was causing quite a bit of stress. She was cutting at the time also, really psychosomatic symptoms, really seeking attention, those kinds of things. She had all the classic cases. So things to look for. Really it begins with intervention with the parent and getting them to understand that their behavior is going to produce negative outcomes in their children. And we have to intervene as much as we can and advocate for the child so that they have communication between parent and child, and that that the child understands everything that's going on, but not directly involved in the conflict. Any questions about these disorders? Anybody has children right now with these disorders? Any on these lists? One more thing with this slide before I move on is also that when, still talking about parents, when a divorce happens, a parent cannot parent as effectively. There's the financial aspect, but it's also the stress. They may be undergoing some depression as well, or anxiety about the divorce, especially if it's forced on them and they don't want to be divorced or be getting divorced. So their diminished wellness impacts the child. So their inability to function daily creates poor parenting for the child as a result. And so that's something else to look at, that we want to advocate that the parents get their own personal help so that they're more available to the child, because ultimately the child suffers in these situations. Who wants to stay a little longer on this slide? Oh. Here we go. Sorry about that. So these are the symptoms. You have the diagnosis. These are some things that you might be seeing in the child themselves. So the loyalty conflict, they don't know what to do with it, especially if you have adultery and it's full disclosure. Mom or dad has told them what is going on. The child may be unsure how to react to the parent. So here's my mom, here's my dad that I love so much, and now they've hurt another one of my parents that I love so much. Who do I trust? Who do I believe? Who do I hold on to? And this occurs probably in the older children versus the younger. The younger may not be able to cognitively grasp what is going on in terms of adultery and those kinds of things. With some of the older children, you might find that they will completely alienate themselves from a parent. They don't want anything to do with one of the parents, and they've shut themselves off, which essentially is shutting off a resource and a support. Some other things, the poor parenting, I think we talked about it, and the shared psychosis. So these are symptoms that you'll see within the child over the umbrella of the diagnosis. Here's something interesting to talk about too, is the intentional alienation. So if you have one parent that is so angry and refuses that the child talk to or see the other parent because of their own anger, you might find some issues there. I have a case now where the mom is actually trying to go to court to keep the dad from the daughter. Her claim is that dad is a trigger and causes more conflicts in the home, so she doesn't want any contact. The problem with that is that the daughter completely identifies with the dad as her primary parent. She has a closer relationship with the dad, she feels more connected with the dad, and mom is trying to completely cut them off. Okay? Which you can imagine what kind of stress that causes. Lots of fighting, lots of anger, lots of spiting back and forth, and they just are not getting along. Another problem is that mom is talking about dad on the phone to various family members and talking about how terrible he is and all the things that he's done, rehashing all of the hurts. And so the child is in the other room. I love my dad, I have a good relationship with dad, but I have to hear all of this. And those are things that we, as clinicians, have to think about intervening and making sure that we meet with the parent to let them know how damaging these kinds of things can be. Other results, as we said, parental estrangement, really excessive worrying, especially for the younger guys, and especially if they're not being told what's going on, and they have no idea what's expected. Where am I going to live? Where am I going to go to school? Am I going to get to see my friends? Why are we staying at grandma's? Why can't we go home? That kind of thing. Sadness, anger, oppositional behavior happens a lot with adolescent. We're going to take a look at all the stages, and you'll see where they fit in terms of the child's age and development. Impaired social relationships, also a problem at school. They might be starting to fight at school. They might be doing poorly at school academically. And of course, this child psychological abuse, that can come from the parent. So apparently, if the parent is doing some of the damaging talk about another parent, that could actually be considered psychological abuse on the child. Okay, so definitely address that issue with your parents, that it may not be a physical abuse, it may not be a DCP&P case, but it's definitely psychological. And as we know, psychological abuse can be much more damaging and pervasive versus a physical abuse. Here's the reality. When adults decide to split, the child has no control. No control. And that builds a lot of anger, resentment, frustration. And that's where we come in. That's where we have to really be supportive and help them through the process, help them regain control of what they can have control over. All right, so let's go through the stages and see. So how many of you have a child right now that you're seeing between the ages of 3 and 8? Wow, that's a lot. Okay. So what I did for you is I divided the PowerPoint between Erickson's stages. These are things that we want to see the child develop through these years. So Erickson says that they should be building basic trust in the very younger years. They should be building autonomy, initiative, and industry. That means that they can set out on their own in the world, and the world is safe. They can walk over away from mom or away from dad, and mom and dad will still be there. They still believe that there'll be that connection, and they're not afraid. So, and they are then starting to develop their own personality. I can draw a picture. I can go to the potty okay, and they're starting to develop a little bit of who they are based on the world around them. So you can imagine what happens to a 3 to 8-year-old when divorce happens. Now suddenly mom and dad are split. The world that I thought was safe is now no longer safe. And the development, once development is disrupted, that could be long-term. If they never get to the different stages, they can't continue on. And so insecurity, helplessness, they're definitely enemies of initiative and industry. Guilt and blame occurs at this age, where they feel that it might be their fault. Sometimes the very younger children, depending on how it was told to them, they might relate something they did. So if maybe they had an argument the night before, or they didn't put their toys away, or daddy tripped over the toys and kicked it, and that started a big fight, and and daddy left, that night, they may relate what happened as a direct consequence. So it's very important that we have those conversations with them and ease their concerns about the guilt and the blame, and help them understand that this is something bigger than them, that it's not from the toy. And this is for the younger guys. Skill regression you can see, so if we suddenly digress into baby talk, and we wet our beds. So this is common, that the stages that they've already gone through and have been successful in, they kind of go backwards in. Anybody have that occurring? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I have, she's 4 years old, and there's terrible conflict between mom and dad. And dad is more aggressive, and she will start before it's time for her to go, to his house, start having symptoms of not feeling good. The mom has talked about her started bedwetting, which she hasn't done before, and she had a situation where she was at dad's, and she was sleeping. She was in the bed, got in bed with dad, and she wet herself. So dad immediately kind of alienated her. So even when she's not feeling well or sick when she's over there, she's not allowed to go into him for comfort.
So he's rejected her even more.
Yes.
How old is she?
She's 4.
She's 4. Yeah. That's heartbreaking. We're going to talk a little bit later of what we can do in a situation like that. Maybe with joint custody, trying to go into both sides of the family, and maybe having a conversation with dad at that point on.
Well, and dad he's abusive.
Okay.
I mean, he and the mom separated, got divorced, and he's come back to the house and attacked her a couple of times, and she's witnessed it. So she's fearful of going over there. And so I'm meeting at the mom's house and at dad's house, and I can see she's more guarded, and dad is like right there. So my next thing I'm gonna ask is perhaps when I go over again, if we can meet alone.
Yeah.
Just.
I'm surprised that they're letting him see her without supervision.
Well, he's living at home with his parents,
Okay, so there's
so that's
supervising.
supposed to be supervision.
Thank you for sharing the story. Okay, so as they get a little bit older, about 9 to 11 years, a little bit more cognitive ability to understand things. One more point, let me just go back for just a second. With the younger guys, and we're going to, one of the things I talk about in the second session is some of the techniques for the younger guys. They can't express that emotion. At 4 years old, she's really not able to express fully her feelings of rejection and fear and guilt and blame and all those things. So providing ways for them to have pictures or artwork or some way to express that emotional outlet is really beneficial for this group. So 9 to 11 years. This stage is more about industry and identity. We start with identity even in the younger pre-adolescent years of starting to see who they are. This is happening younger also overall, that the kids in the 11, 12 bracket, they're acting more like adolescent sooner. There's a lot of intense anger at this point in the stage. They'll reject one side of the parent, but the anger, it can be a cover-up for a lot of the other emotions that they might be feeling, especially the older ones. They could be feeling that loneliness, that grief, that shock, and it could just be hidden by the anger. Again, if you look at it in relation to what they should be doing, their identity, now the questions come up, well, who am I? I was the son or daughter of so-and-so and so-and-so. Who am I now? Now that the family's broken up, where do I fit into this? Now I'm a child of 2 homes, And then if other people are involved in terms of other relationships and remarriages, this identity can be difficult to develop at this stage. And again, you're looking at that, not only if the divorce is happening at this age, this is the immediate product of it, but also long-term, if that identity hasn't been developed by the time they get to teens and they're acting out, that may be one of the reasons that they haven't been fully developed yet in the younger stages because of the divorce and the separation. Anybody have children in this age group? Okay. Anyone want to share? Anybody seeing some of this? Okay. Withdrawal, self-isolation, resistance to do things at home, resistance to be participating in school, things of that nature. Negative thoughts on life, so you might see some of the depressive symptoms at this point
I have
as
a
well.
question.
Yes.
Now, now that you bring that up, do you find that some of the kids, especially in this age group or any age, acquire ADHD because of situations, because of the trauma?
Actually, I did, one of the articles I read made a connection with, again, the way that the parents deal with the divorce and the way that their interaction is actually increases that hyperactivity. And it's predominant in boys,
Yeah, that's what
not as much as in girls. So yes, yes. How old is the boy?
He's 10, but parents are divorced, and whenever I'm over there, both of them are good, they're nice, but I primarily am with the mother. The mother will talk about how the father doesn't do much or doesn't, help her with the son, and if there's another relationship involved, too, from the father's end. And the son is a little fearful more so of the father because he's like the stern disciplinarian, and there was a time when he really was reprimanded by the father. I think the kid claimed he threw him, but, so yeah, but he has ADHD, and his view on things of the world, his resistance, and his behavior
Is very similar to
the
that.
social environment and the home environment.
So it might be beneficial to explore the divorce with him and see where what he feels, and also what does he know? What does he know about what is happening or has happened? I find that the parents don't want to tell the kids everything, but that makes it worse. They really need to know what's going on. Yes.
I have a child, she's 13 now.
Okay, that's the
And-
next slide.
And the mother is kind of gratifying her, and she's put her in adult situations with the father, and the father is he's abused drugs. So he doesn't have joint custody with him. And she is forcing the child, like, the child cut him off. Like, she started blocking him on the phone, so she didn't want to talk to him. So he had promised, called the wife and told her that if, he did certain things, he'd take a drug test in front of them, and all of these things he promised. So the mother is forcing her to go along with the other two kids, and she says she's not ready. So I, told the mom, that I didn't feel she should force her.
Yeah.
I said because she does have a right, for her feelings.
Yeah, especially 13, to be able to kind of express that. That's something too with parents is helping them understand that validation, especially in the teen years, is super important. Just validate what I feel. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to change what you're doing. But if I say to you, yeah, so it sounds like you're really upset, and now I'm with you. I'm with you in the moment, and that makes a huge difference with teens. So yeah, I think that mom needs to maybe learn how to do that a little bit.
Well, I had suggested that perhaps, they have like a family therapist to come in, because mom kind of jumps in on when I'm working with her, and she starts talking about, related things, and she kind of like tries to take over, the session, so.
Yeah, it's very dangerous to try to make a child a parent to be taking the parental role. So yeah, that's definitely something to address. Good. Thank you. So the last stage, adolescence, and I put it on the bulletin here. Just recently talking to a friend of mine, and he was talking about his experience when his parents divorced, and he was about 23 when it happened. I know we don't see that age group. Obviously, we just work with the children and teens, but I thought the story was really poignant because he really experienced a trauma at 23 years old. He wasn't even living at home, but it really had him conflicted about his identity and growth and development at that point. And he, in thinking of divorce, that just because they're a little bit older, maybe they're 16, 17, you think, well, they can handle divorce a little bit better than, say, a 5-year-old or a 9-year-old who doesn't understand. But that's not the case. Divorce can be a trauma for any age group. And again, it may take them into adulthood. So if we don't resolve the issues that they have now, either during the divorce or soon after the divorce happens, then they may be taking those issues into their adulthood and into their adult relationships, because they'll have a difficulty with trust, they'll have a difficulty with the idea of marriage as well, and relationships in general. So at this stage, I like to go over the grief model. That's in the second session. We delve into that a little bit more. But divorce should be considered a grief and a crisis, because they're not only losing a parent, they're losing that family structure. They might be losing their home, and like we said, they might be moving away, so they might be losing school. They might be losing a hope, or it just could be the idea of parents being together that they are losing. And this is definitely a crisis for a child, for an adolescent also. There's a lot of anger and pain and sadness, a lot of acting out. When we talked about earlier how there's diminished parenting, this really becomes a problem with teens. Because if they're not being parented, what happens with teenagers when they're not being parented? Anybody working with teens with poor parenting? What are some things that they're doing? Making bad decisions?
Yeah, they have defined behaviors. They think they're grown, can't tell me what to do.
Defiant, right. And if they're really angry and they want to kind of spite or get back at the parent, this is something that they will do. They'll either engage in drugs and alcohol. Suicide also. One of the suicide can in some cases is a product of spite, that they want to spite. Not always. It's one of the things. But that's something too, that sometimes they can be angry enough that they just want to lash out to the point of that. So, and they know their parents' triggers, and they're going to push them because they're angry with them, and they're hurt. A lot of, some delinquency, promiscuity, like you said, poor decisions, aggressive behavior, alcohol and drugs. And we talk about their identity and the intimacy is with relationships. Now they're going to be struggling with their own relationships and what it means to stay together and be in a committed relationship, because now their model of commitment has been apart. And something to remember, that when the divorce happens, there's probably a ton of stuff beforehand. There's probably months to years of activity before the point of divorce that's brought up to this. So there's probably been quite a bit of time of poor parenting, or quite a bit of time of angry yelling and screaming and issues between the couple. So sometimes the divorce is just kind of like the straw that broke it. So also other things to explore is, in general, how are those relationships affecting the child? And with an adolescent, you might want to talk about relationships. Talk about what they want. Talk about who they want to be in a relationship as well. Yes?
One thing you haven't mentioned that I've seen is sometimes divorce and separation is actually a relief to the child, because they're tired of the family going at it constantly.
Yeah.
And then they separate and they have peace with the one parent and peace with the other parent. And there's actually some relief.
So it's actually a positive. Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked about it during this thing because I like to stay in the negative. No, I don't. I'm just trying to show you some things to watch out for. But you're right. In some cases, it's a relief. I still would maybe have those conversations about their future relationships and what their idea now of relationship is, and whether it may disrupt that. We don't always have to advocate for marriage, but the idea is that, do they still want a relationship, and what's that going to look like for them? How would they do things differently? Good. Thanks for the comment. Okay, so these are the different stages that we went through. I have a case study and a treatment goal that I put together. So just to give you an example, and I also have the EAISP plan, and I just did one goal and 2 goals for the treatment plan, so that you can take a look at what it might look like. So when you get the material, I want you to consider the diagnosis that I chose, and maybe you might have a different idea based on the slides that we saw today. and take a look at the symptoms and the things that you're seeing in Meredith and what you might focus on in your therapy and treatment goals. Remember, a treatment goal is like the end of the line. So that's the checkered flag, that's where they've reached where they need to be. An objective is those stop points all along the way before they get to the finish line of things that they will accomplish so that they can make it to the finish line. The intervention I think of as you cheerleading and cheering them on the side as they're running their race and their journey. You're kind of doing those interventions and techniques so that they hit each of the objectives and ultimately reach their goals at the end. So you'll see that I chose 2 goals, one for the family and the parents and one for Meredith herself. And I have some interventions and objectives. So we're going to talk about that today, and I'm really looking forward to some of your input because hopefully this should be a learning session for all of us, and I know that many of you have some great ideas to share. Who are the BAs and everyone get a case vignette? Oh, you didn't get it? Passed you right by.
We need one more back here too.
Whole pack or?
No, the whole thing. Thank you.
So if you take a few minutes to read through the case, everybody, all the papers. Take a few minutes to read through the case. And then you should have the case, So once you've read through the case, go ahead and discuss it with a couple of people around you and share some of the thoughts that you may have had. Taking a look also at the treatment plan and the AISP plan. Okay, so let's hear some of your thoughts on Meredith. So going back to the developmental stages, how old is Meredith?
Well,
Okay, so let's go. She's in between 9 and 11 and then into the adolescent. So how much does she fit into this stage? Not so much? What about in this stage? What is she at? Yeah, definitely. Sadness. Anxiety. So that's important too to note, is that sometimes the age doesn't necessarily give us where they should fit. Sometimes they're above their age, sometimes they're a little bit below. So tell me some of your thoughts about Meredith and what you think, what you would maybe focus on in her treatment.
I would say it seems almost like a transition point to me. Because when it's not like she doesn't want to be with others when she's there, she's not. And then the anxiety comes before for her
we address it, fix this parents, you know, tell them curbside pickup, don't talk to each other. You have a problem with sending an email, but I mean, it seems like it's the pickup and the drop-offs, you know, the bickering, and she doesn't need to be a part of that, so.
Keeping her separate from the bickering at
Yeah,
those points.
yeah, because now, I mean, she doesn't need, it seems like it's the anxiety about the transition. So if you make that transition without any issues or problems, you know, curbside pickup, drop off, mom stays in the car, dad stays in the house. She's got a goal, she should be able to get out of the car and order out.
And that, I'm gonna come back to that in a moment. Let's hear from a couple more people.
I was just gonna say that I think that she has a loyalty and quality.
Yeah, definitely,
Mhm.
definitely. Having a loyalty, not really knowing who to side with.
Also, since she primarily stays with her mother, you don't necessarily, it's not mentioned in the cases, but you don't know what she's possibly saying about the father, which is working up that internal anxiety to where she has to, you know, the symptoms become mild when she's with the father, but then they start to diminish because she's starting to realize maybe what mom is saying isn't necessarily true.
Yeah.
I don't know, after you assess the situation, sometimes it's a little more challenging to address parents who are in constant conflict. So my solution to the individual is to deal with emotions and feelings of what's going on with her, and help her to acquire better coping skills, because she's not going to have to anticipate that these things are going to occur.
Yeah.
If they don't occur, then fine, and if they do, then this is usual things to do.
Help her to manage that. It's good. Good coping.
I had two thoughts. I was wondering about her contact with each parent when she's not with that person, so phone calls, that kind of thing. I would be curious about that, and also I'd love to see her in some type of peer group, you know, for support.
Maybe like a divorce peer group.
Yeah.
Great, I like that. It's really good. Any other treatment goals? What about for BAs? Any ideas from you in terms of what techniques and things you would bring into the counseling session?
It's important to be able to have the client convey how she's feeling. So, you know, as she's transitioning, how are you feeling about this? What is it that you need, you know, to make the transition more effective for you? Maybe hearing that. And I know that having the parents come together might not be, because they both argue back and forth, but maybe even
For the girls' benefit, teaching them how to talk to each other so that they're not disrupting her. Any other comments or thoughts? How do you feel about the treatment goal that, the two treatment goals, appropriate for her? And it's kind of a twofold plan, right? We're going to work with the parents and we're working with the child. We just have to manage the environment along with the individual. So just some final thoughts as we finish up this morning is the holidays and special occasions, you might find that they are more triggered, especially if there's a conflicted home. I can imagine Meredith, maybe things going well for her for a while, and then we hit a holiday or a birthday, and it increases again, because how will the parents manage her birthday? Will they do one big party, two separate parties? How are they going to kind of navigate through that? Especially new divorces, those are things that to maybe help the family consider that there's going to be some conflicts on the special days, and have them have a preemptive attack. You know, how are you going to deal with this? How are you going to make this do? So there's some of those aspects of divorce that we will need to work with and navigate through. Advocating for the youth, 100%. We have to work with the parent, and that's part of the advocacy for the youth. We have to hope for always for those cases,